Steven Bradbury is a former Australian short track speed skater from Queensland, Australia. You probably know him as the luckiest Olympic gold medalist ever. That's what people call him, among many other phrases that surround his name and general aura. Steven Bradbury's fame of course lies in that famous race, but in order to uncover the amazing story of how he got to that race, we have to go back. Way back. Bradbury grew up in Western Sydney, but eventually moved to tropical Queensland, a part of Australia that is known for its pretty much year-long warm climate. While his friends were interested in summer sports such as rugby, footy, cricket, tennis and basketball, Steven wanted to put on the ice skates. While everyone else was busy playing their summer sports, Steven loved short track speed skating. In order to facilitate his love for the sport, Bradbury would train at the only skating rink in Brisbane. It was here where he would spend hours and hours developing his craft in order to become a professional short track speed skater. Bradbury, by his own admission, was not all that interested in the sport and had been pushed by his dad, also a former Australian pro, to work hard towards achieving his goals. Steven lacked motivation as a youngster, and it seemed as though he would never reach his potential in the sport. However, the turning point would occur when he was 15 years old. Bradbury, a reserve skater on the Australian national team at the time, would travel to the World Speed Skating Championships in Amsterdam. Here, he saw a Japanese short track speed skater by the name of Kawasaki, like the motorbike brand, pass 3 competitors on the outside and break the world record by 0.8 of a second. This was the moment where he realized his desire to be a short track speed skater and no longer needed to be pushed by his father to train hard for the sport. In 1991, Bradbury would experience the first big achievement of his career. During the World Championships in Sydney, he was part of the Australian quartet that won the 5,000 metre relay and subsequently a gold medal. This also happened to be the first time Australia had won a world championship in a winter sport. At just 17 years of age, Bradbury would experience the thrill of winning gold for the very first time, right at the dawn of his long career. After Steven had just turned 18 years old, he competed in his first Winter Olympic Games. This also happened to be the first edition of short track speed skating as a medal sport. During the Games, the Australian short track relay team Bradbury was named a part of barely finished in 4th place, missing out in the final. Bradbury himself was on the bench. Furthermore, he would not go on to be selected for any individual events either. However, the disappointment of being named but not actually competing in his first Olympics would only drive him to work harder and train harder, as just 2 years later at the Lillehammer 1994 Olympics, Bradbury and his 3 other Aussie teammates would go on to create some memorable history for their country. After just barely scraping into the 4-team final by just over a second, their tactic for the final was pretty simple: stay on their feet, avoid disqualification, and try and at least beat one of the 3 teams to reach the podium. They did manage to finish in 3rd and claimed Australia's first ever Winter Olympics medal, a treasured bronze. This was Steven's first taste at Olympic medal glory and proved to be another key moment in his career which could only drive him to further success and surely a continued good luck streak. Little did he know, however, that his skating career and his life would encounter a terrifying moment just months later. When competing in the 1994 World Cup event in Montreal, Bradbury was working hard on the ice in a short track race when all of a sudden a collision occurred between him and a rival skater. This wasn't just a standard collision though. Before I explain the incident, a word of warning: the details of this are incredibly gruesome. Unfortunately, the rival skater's blade sliced open Bradbury's right thigh. It actually cut through to the other side of the thigh. Bradbury explains the injury in more detail during an interview he did, and again, a warning, it only just gets more gruesome.
So you lie on the ice. You got 4 litres of blood around you, and from memory, one of the doctors jumped the fence and basically stuck their thumb in your thigh, I think to close off the artery, stop you bleeding further.
His thumb and forefinger, he put it inside of my leg and squeezed his fingers together with my artery in between, or with my femoral vein in between them, to stop the blood from spurting about 2 metres across the rink. And a human of my size has around about 5.5 litres, so I lost 3/4 of my blood in 60 seconds.
His heart rate was near 200, meaning the blood was leaving his body fast. It was all 4 of his quadricep muscles that had been sliced through. He fought to retain consciousness in fear that if he lost consciousness, he would surely die. He needed 111 stitches, and for 3 weeks he wouldn't even move. It also took 18 months for his leg to get back to full strength. As you probably have guessed by just taking a little peep at the title of this vid, Steven Bradbury was not the type of person to retire from short track speed skating then and there. An accident as serious and near life ending as this would probably cause most of us to call it a day on a sport as dangerous as this. You have to remember though that Bradbury is an Aussie, which means that he's made of tough stuff. His body remarkably regained its strength and he returned with the same Australian quartet for the 1998 Nagano Winter Olympics. Despite being a strong medal contender in his individual events and a contender in the team event, he and the fellow Aussies crashed out in the 5,000 metre relay event, missing out on the medal final by just 4 seconds. Ironically, an unfortunate contrast to 1994 where they made the final by a second. In the individual events, he disappointed himself terribly as he couldn't make it past the heats, having been involved in collisions with other racers in the 500 metre and 1000 metre short track events. To an outsider, this was an amazing effort for Bradbury to fight back from almost losing his life 4 years earlier to then compete in an Olympics once again. However, to Bradbury, the ultimate hardworking perfectionist, this was simply him just not skating his best. He knew he could do better, both physically and tactically, and he let himself down. 2 years later, in September 2000, Bradbury broke his neck in a training accident. Another skater fell right in front of him, and in a split-second panic, he tried to jump over him, but ended up clipping him and subsequently tripped headfirst into the side barriers. This fractured Bradbury's C4 and C5 vertebrae. Bradbury, in his own words, describes his torturous experience of being in a halo brace.
Initially, when you first get it for the first week, you can't describe the discomfort. When they first screw it into your head naturally retreats and gets smaller because it's trying to compensate from this thing they've screwed into your skull. And so they have to come back at first every hour to tighten up the screws. And then it's like every 4 hours, and then it's once a day, and then it's once every 3 days until you get to about a week where your head finally can't shrink anymore and the thing is finally fitted correctly.
Of course, as you would have guessed, despite doctors' wishes, he continued to compete in the sport. He was just that determined to get redemption for his crashes in the 94 and 98 Winter Games and was willing to try and skate his best in a Winter Olympics no matter how great the risk it was for his body. Also, if you know injured athletes, you will of course know that they do not retire when they have unfinished business, especially when doctors tell them not to compete again, and especially when they say to the athlete, you will never be able to compete again. So all of that context of Bradbury's career leads us to here, the 2002 Winter Olympics in Salt Lake City, USA, the only part of his career that seems to be remembered by the world despite all the hardship that led him to this point. So how did Steven even make it to the final of the 1000 meter short track event? Well, to find out, let's take a look at his races leading into that medals A final. In typical fashion with me creating this video, there's, shock horror, no footage of the heat he got through to advance to the quarterfinals. Just the quarters, semis, and the final. It's just fantastic when you find a career like Bradbury's that has so many Winter Olympics appearances, yet the footage that goes with those appearances is nowhere to be found. This is what all of you who found this video has bargained for, and likely is the only thing you know about. Everything before this point was potentially unknown by most of you. So I'm more or less hoping these amazing moments in world sporting history are now about to be looked at by you, the viewer, in perhaps a different way than you may have looked at them before you knew how Steven made it to this very point. The biggest moment of his career. So here we are, with the quarterfinal 2 for the 1000 meter short track skating event at the Salt Lake City Winter Games. In this race, he competes against some pretty imposing competition. He faces 14-time World Championship gold medalist, 4-time overall champion and winner of 3 Olympic gold medals, Marc Gagnon, and 8-time World Championships gold medalist and 2-time Olympic gold medalist, Apollo Anton Ono. The starting gun signals go for the competitors. At the beginning, all races are jockeying for starting positions, pacing themselves and not really making any moves. However, with 5 laps to go, Bradbury makes a move on a turn and goes from last place to first on the inside. It seems like this move might have won him a top 2 placing and a place in the semis. However, just as 3 laps to go becomes 2 to go, he completely gets outplayed by the other much higher ranked competitors, more specifically Gagnon and Ono, and moves right back into last place where he started the race. Bradbury knows he made his move way too early and manages to just hang on to cross the finish line for a respectable 3rd place. The commentator announces that Bradbury will miss out, and it seems like he is lost in the quarterfinals. This is despite in his own mind, he gave it his all in this race, and to even manage to move on the inside into first place without collisions or falling over, even despite not making it, was simply him skating his absolute best. So it looks like that's it. That's how his fourth and most likely final Olympic Games completes. However, the judges converse in the middle of the ice and decide to disqualify Gagnon for prohibited contact on other competitors during the race. Due to his unprecedented disqualification and illegal contact on the other races, all other competitors go through to the semi-finals, including Bradbury, and much to his surprise, the dream lives on after all. So he's done it. Bradbury has advanced to the semis in an individual short track speed skating event for the first time since the '94 Winter Games, but he knows that quarterfinal was only the beginning, and now the real challenge begins. He's attempting to do something he's never done before in 4 Winter Olympic Games, reach the medals A final for an individual short track speed skating event at an Olympics. In the semis, he faces a different field of unbelievable skaters. There's 12-time World Championships gold medalist, 2-time overall world champion, and 5-time combined silver and bronze Olympic medalist, Li Juanjun. Sorry if I said that wrong. There's also 7-time World Championships gold medalist and 1-time Olympic gold medalist, Matthew Turcotte, and also 11-time World Champs gold medalist and 1-time Olympic gold medalist in the same event 4 years earlier, Kim Don-sun. As the starting gun signals go, Bradbury's tactic becomes clear, as at the beginning of the race he sticks to the back of the pack. He stays there for most of the race, however continues to maintain pace while staying in touch with the rest of the field. Halfway through the final lap, defending gold medalist in this event, Sun from Korea, attempts to make a move on the inside, but loses his footing and falls down on the ice. Then the remaining 4 competitors take that last turn before all of a sudden 2 skaters seemingly lose their footing in the pressure of the moment. Bradbury is one of 2 competitors left standing after his genius tactic of sticking to the back of the pack pays off. However, the Japanese skater Satoru Tarao is seen celebrating and celebrating some more, thinking he's just made it into an Olympic final despite the fact that he illegally bumped other competitors throughout the race. This means that Bradbury finishes the semi-final in first place. So Steven Bradbury, competing in his 4th Olympic Games, a man who broke his neck in training, lost most of the blood in his body and almost his life, has made it through to the final of an individual short track speed skating event for the first time ever. You'd think that was a good enough spot for the comeback story to end right then and there, right? Wrong! Steven is in the Olympic final, and he's up against champion short track rivals Ono, Turcotte, Lo, and Hyun-soo. Ono is hyped up in commentary before the race as the heavy favourite and the most exciting skater in the field, with Hyun-soo and Lee also solid chances at taking out the gold. Bradbury is considered a slight long shot even for a medal finish. He doesn't care about that though. He's in the moment, in the zone, and he knows that this is it. The biggest race of his life. Everything has come down to this. All the blood, sweat, tears shed, and necks broken. Doctors telling him never to compete again. All of that has led to this moment. He gets in a position with the other racers, and the starting gun sounds.
Set.
As the final begins, Bradbury looks to have completely confirmed his tactic, as he begins the race very slowly and carefully at the back of the pack. Steven drifts further away from the back of the pack a few times during the race, but each time he regains his pace and stays in touch with the other racers. However, with 2 laps to go, he begins to tire and drifts further and further back from the group of racers. With 1 lap to go, the commentators are excitedly hyping up Apollo Ono's performance, believing he is going to be near impossible to overtake from first place. Let's pause here. Around halfway into the final lap, Bradbury is so far from the rest of the field that it seems as though his tactic of sticking at the back of the pack has been somewhat of a failure, with him being all but confirmed to finish in last place. But then...
But the Chinese skater on the outside, oh, and it's a lot of contact, oh! They've all gone down, Bradbury is going to come through and win gold! Steven Bradbury from the the tail of the field.
Within seconds, Steven has gone from last place and a slow racer in the Olympic final to the Olympic champion of the 2002 Salt Lake City 1,000 meter individual event in the short track speed skating. So what the hell happened? How did this turn into this? As the racers are halfway through that final turn towards the finish line, they are all very close to one another on the ice. Everyone wants the gold so badly as they tussle for first place. This results in them all colliding at once during that final turn. One racer can't handle the pack of racers and drops off before the remaining competitors left in the pack all collide with one another, leaving Bradbury at the back of the pack to glide through beautifully for the win of his life. Collisions, as you would have guessed by now, are a pretty normal occurrence in short track speed skating, especially when push comes to shove right at the end of a competitive race. However, it's usually just the one or two racers falling over, and it's typically someone that was racing close to the lead throughout who keeps their feet and finishes in first when others fall over nearby. This is one of those incredibly rare and remarkable short track speed skating moments where every person competing couldn't hold on right before the finish line and seemingly snatch defeat from the jaws of victory in terms of proper contention for medals. And of course it was in the Olympics. Without a doubt, this has since become not just one of the most iconic moments in the history of short track speed skating as a sport, but also one of the most iconic Australian sporting moments ever. Real fans of short track speed skating would probably hate this moment, but I think it's one of the greatest moments ever in the history of the sport. Bradbury, after crossing the finish line, is just completely stunned. He doesn't know how to react or what to do when he somehow cruises through for the gold. He just saw all of his competition collapse to the ice before him. Steven thought this tactic of sticking at the back could maybe have fetched him a bronze if he were fortunate, or a silver if he were insanely lucky. But in the end, he wins the ultimate prize an Olympian trains for: Olympic champion and gold medalist. I mean, let's be real though guys, surely after a broken neck and almost dying from the skate slicing open his thigh, he deserved the bronze medal, not gold. No way. That's just too good for him. I mean, he went through a lot for this sport, but surely not enough to win the gold. Pfft. Steven has a patient and nervous wait on the sidelines while the judges deliberate the results. After the judges converse in the middle, the announcement appears on the big screen, and relief, an overwhelming sense of achievement, sets in. But Steven at first doesn't actually believe he deserves the gold medal. The circumstances of the race were just too much for him to bear, as he struggles to come to terms with how he won the gold. He knew he wasn't the best racer in that race, and actually contemplates over whether or not he should accept the gold. But all of a sudden, he decides to head up to the podium and accept his gold medal. But he's not accepting it for the 90 seconds of that race he just competed in. No, he's accepting that gold for the 12 years of blood, sweat, more blood, and also tears he endured in the lead up to that race. For the first time in a Winter Olympic Games, Advance Australia Fair plays for the Olympic champion. Just 2 days later it would play again when Elisa Camplin won the gold medal in the women's aerials. This for me personally is such a proud moment as an Australian. But of course, in that moment for Steven, the emotions he is feeling as he truly comes to understand what this means for Australia would have been nothing short of powerful. And naturally, after such an amazing finish to an Olympic event, the media heavily reports on it. And boy, do they report on it. Some media outlets, more specifically the local American ones, perceive it as a wacky and laughable moment akin to Eddie the Eagle in the Winter Olympic Games past, but others perceive it as genius tactics from a racer who knew right from the outset that the only way to win was to win it Bradbury style. Bradbury appears in multiple interviews, press conferences, and gets understandably a ton of exposure after the event, which would have no doubt been super overwhelming for him. A good old Aussie battler who isn't the most financially secure due to his commitment to a sport in which its athletes don't earn much money for competing in, is all of a sudden thrusted into the spotlight of fame and popularity when earlier in the day he was pretty much completely unknown to the world. But true to form, Bradbury handles his surprising newfound fame like an absolute champ, never becoming arrogant or coming off as a showboater. He just respectfully agrees to the interview requests, does his media coverage, and enjoys a rare moment in the limelight during an otherwise largely unreported short track speed skating career. Undoubtedly my favourite moment from all the media hype is this interview he did with comedy Olympic commentators Roy and HG not long after the victory.
Medal to the medal, there goes a bit of bargy. Yeah. The Canadians are out, Ono's out, and look who's there!
One of the great moments. Were you tempted, Steve, to stop and help him up? You've been in the top 10 for, what, 12 years?
Pretty much, yeah.
Pretty much. So it was about time that a little bit of luck
A little bit.
came through.
What a legend. That's got to be one of my favourite interview moments ever. His perfect reactions to everyone else's reactions to what happened make it all the more enjoyable and entertaining for the people watching back at home. Just a true Aussie bloke. That has to be one of the most Australian moments in the history of Australian moments. Steven Bradbury actually reinvented the wheel when it came to great sporting victories. Just when everyone thought they had seen it all in the way of classic sporting wins, they were wrong. In my not so humble Aussie opinion, this moment is more iconic and more important than any other victory in sporting history. It happened to the right person who had been through hell and back. It also occurred on the biggest stage of all, the Olympic Games. Be it a proud individual win or a win for your country, this moment revolutionised the true meaning of the underdog and what it means to be Australian. It's quite possibly the most Australian thing that has ever happened and ended up coining a now iconic Australian phrase known as doing a Bradbury. The moment when a person in sport or any aspect of life manages to secure an unlikely victory from the jaws of defeat. This race itself, but more importantly the entire prelude that led to this race, was a mostly arduous, long and tough career which finally had its justice in a perfect moment where the heavens opened for one man. The sheer brilliance and destiny that occurred on the ice that day is what makes this moment in time stand out as the greatest sports win ever. You'd think that was a good enough spot for the story to end right then and there. Right? Right? Wrong.
Yeah, it was a crazy afternoon.
Saturday afternoon near Bullock Beach on the Sunshine Coast, the Olympic gold medalist was about to add hero to his resume.
2 metre plus swell running.
4 girls, all 13, were swept out in a rip. Eva Perkins was one.
It was really scary.
Bradbury, a keen surfer, realised he was the only thing standing between 4 young girls being saved or losing their life.
Instinct kicked in instantly.
He reached the girls quickly.
If no one had come to rescue us, so we'd have no chance.
She came running over to me and hugged me so hard that it took my breath out of me. And she said, "Thank you for saving my life."
Without him, we wouldn't be here.
Eva and the girls, oblivious, their rescuer was Australian Olympic royalty.